Now, is China's zero COVID policy right or wrong? This is the question that we're going to be answering in today's video. Everyone, my name is Cyrus Jansen. I'm an American expat, entrepreneur, and someone that makes weekly vlogs about China and its role in society today. Now, as we get started in today's video, I'm going to be bringing in the cultural perspective and analyzing both America's and China's response to COVID-19. I think this is something that many people have not actually looked into, and I want to bring this in because I feel that the biggest challenges between these two nations always boil down to cultural differences, even when we're talking about a nation's COVID-19 response. We'll start today's analysis with a study published in February 2020, which ranked America the #1 country in the world to handle an epidemic. Interesting enough, China, who has excelled and beaten the odds with its zero COVID policy, was ranked number 51 in the world. China's zero COVID policy has been extremely effective, but then last month the Delta variant entered into China. Immediately, skeptics from the West started doubting China's ability to control the new variant, with some even predicting it would cause the fall of China's government. However, Chinese people have a large amount of trust in China's government to control this pandemic and whatever new challenges come China's way. Now, one of the ways that China has really excelled in its COVID-19 response is that it does have one of the strictest quarantine policies. I want you to take a look at this video from Alex, a fellow YouTuber. Many of you will know him from the Reporterfy Media channel, and he recently relocated to the city of Chongqing to start a new job, and he had to go through this 21-day quarantine period. For example, he was quarantined in a hotel for the first 2 weeks. He had daily meals that were delivered to him, but he did not leave this hotel room. Even things like the towels that he used after his shower had to be disposed in biohazard bags. Even disinfecting tablets had to be dropped into the toilet after each use to ensure that the sewer system was not infected by COVID-19. Now, upon completing a 14-day quarantine inside a hotel, Alex was then transferred to his apartment, where he then had to self-quarantine in an apartment for an additional 7 days. And what he's been able to do, as he said, is after going through this 21-day quarantine, I now have a green QR code on my phone, and I now enter into a normal society. He said, I can walk around, shops are busy, people are walking about, domestic tourism is flourishing, and it's a very stark contrast to where he was living. However, many people around the world still criticize China's response to COVID-19. For a valuable perspective, let's listen to Malcolm Clark. He's an Oscar-winning UK director who has spent significant time filming projects inside of China. And in this video, he responds to the draconian method that China's government has often been accused of using.
And frankly, I find it very, very galling to see that China is still being kind of attacked for what I feel was a completely remarkable response. Draconian is their favorite word. And draconian means unnecessarily punitive, unnecessarily hard, unnecessarily authoritarian. What they did was they saved China. It wasn't draconian, it was smart, and it was effective. Yes, of course, you deprive people of freedom. The freedom to die? I would like to be deprived of the freedom to die. Journalists use the word, it's because they're buying a kind of a Western prejudiced view of China. It's the lazy, mean-spirited, spiteful description of what China did.
To give everybody some further perspective, consider this. I live in Vancouver, Canada, and at the beginning of this summer, I spoke to many Chinese parents at my daughter's school, and many of them had decided to return back to China for this year's summer holiday. Now in Canada, our summer holiday is 10 weeks. However, these parents are taking their children back to China, and they will have to quarantine for 3 weeks upon arrival. In addition, when they return back to Canada, they will have to quarantine for an additional 2 weeks. Now, this really shows the high level of trust that Chinese people have in their government and how they've been able to control COVID-19 inside of China. So much that Chinese people living abroad are willing to spend 50% of their summer holiday in quarantine just so they could spend the remaining 50% living a normal life inside of China again. Now, in addition to that, for anybody that's thinking that it's China's government that is forcing its Chinese people to act like this, I want you to take a look at this video footage from a flight from Bangkok to Shanghai. These are not medical professionals. These are normal Chinese citizens that are flying in complete hazmat suits. Again, this is not a government regulation. When you fly to the country of China, you are not required to wear a hazmat suit. But this is the level of extent that Chinese people are willing to go to protect their life. Culturally, there is nothing more important for the Chinese people than saving their life. And Chinese people are willing to give up a little bit of that freedom. And this is where Americans are very different. Throughout this entire pandemic, Americans have been fighting wearing masks, have been fighting getting vaccines, and most recently have been fighting getting vaccine passports. Mainly because they feel that this is a violation of their freedom. Remember, freedom is the ultimate value for American citizens. And this is why it's very difficult for American government officials to truly unite an entire population in an effective COVID-19 response. In America, it's all about your individual freedom. And in China, it's more about doing what you need to do for your society and moving forward as one united nation. However, I think it's really important that we have to look at this cultural element and determine what is the best COVID-19 response for your individual country. Let me give you an example. Just recently, the country of Australia decided to go away from their zero COVID policy because ultimately it was not working for the country of Australia. The country of Australia had almost 6 or 7 different lockdown periods, but what they found is that this was not a sustainable way of living. This was the exact words of the Prime Minister Scott Morrison. And Australia is not alone in this. For example, the country of Denmark recently stated that they have also reached a very high vaccination level and that they too will be easing off COVID-19 restrictions and starting to open up their entire country again. At this point, there are really 2 questions that people have. Number 1, how long will this pandemic last? And number 2, when will China reopen for international travel? Well, let me answer the first question by bringing up a recent article that I read on CNBC. This is an article that highlights the famous epidemiologist Larry Brilliant, and he states that the world is nowhere near the end of the pandemic. He goes on to state that only 15% of the world's population has been vaccinated, and more than 100 countries have inoculated less than 5% of their people. Unless we vaccinate everyone in 200 plus countries, there will still be new variants, he said, predicting that the coronavirus will eventually become a forever virus like influenza. Unfortunately, I do realize that the COVID-19 pandemic really is not going to end anytime soon, and that we must accept the reality that we are going to have to be battling this for many years to come. Now, I am hopeful because I have been double vaccinated here in Canada, and I am optimistic as many Western countries around the world are achieving very high vaccination rates. Even the country of China just recently passed over 2 billion doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. And this is very promising, as many Western countries and countries like China are reaching very high vaccination levels. Potentially, we can then turn around and start giving more support to smaller countries and countries that are in dire need of vaccinations. Now, when will China open for international travel? Well, recently I took to Twitter and decided to run a poll asking that exact same question to my followers. When do you think China will open its border up for international travel? The end of 2022, after the 22 Olympics, or 2023 or later? Now, it's not the largest sample size. There were 440 votes, but 38% of people did feel that China would open up after 2023. I will say this, I can pretty much guarantee that China is not going to take a risk, and they most definitely will not open up before the Beijing 2022 Olympics in February of next year. China most definitely is going to do its best to control the Delta variant and to control COVID-19 inside of China. Once again, to ensure a good quality of life for its citizens, because again, culturally, this is what Chinese people have come to expect. Chinese people around the world have a great respect for the Chinese government and a great trust in China's government to handle the COVID-19 response. Again, like I mentioned earlier in this video, you're not going to have Chinese citizens living here in Canada be willing to sacrifice 50% of their summer holiday in quarantine if they did not have faith in China's government and want to experience a normalcy of life inside the borders of China. Now, as we come to the end of today's video, let's answer that first question. Has China's zero COVID policy been the right or wrong decision for the country of China? I believe it has worked out very well for the country of China, most importantly because it has been proven to be a very safe and effective way to manage this pandemic. But most importantly, it is culturally the right decision because this is what Chinese people prefer. When I speak to Chinese parents on the ground here in Canada, they wish that Canada's government had stricter policies. They wish that facial masks were required in schools for all of the children. However, they do realize that they are living in a Western country because Canada, like America, values that personal freedom. And again, this is why I always come back to this main point. The biggest differences between our countries is simply back to culture. So when we're looking at individual countries around the world, I think we need to respect everybody's individual decision. We know that the United States is never going to be able to respond like China to a virus because the United States is a country made of individual people looking out for their own personal interests. This is a very stark contrast to the country of China, that when a pandemic comes, they're going to unite, they're going to listen to their government, they're going to do whatever they can to make sure that they mitigate these risks and that they can live a normal life. Everybody, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to spend it with me here on YouTube, and I hope you enjoyed today's deep dive into the cultural aspects of a nation's individual COVID-19 response. The country of China is going to respond differently than America. That is something that we're just going to have to accept, and we should be able to respect that decision, and hopefully, once this world gets through this pandemic, brighter days will be ahead and international travel can reopen again. Thank you all for your continued support, and I look forward to seeing you all in a future video.